and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast where we come together freely and of our own free will. None of us are court mandated to be here and make a story for you, our beautiful listeners. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. This is our final episode for our folk hero story. It's going to be great. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be awesome. What we have is a post-Civil War alternate history where Merlin, famous wizard from England, traveled to America before the Revolution and has helped to guide America. He, as his last sort of great plot, brought together his knights and foiled the attempt on Abraham Lincoln's life. However, he's been out of his druid sleep for long enough that he needs to go back if he's going to be awake for the next great thing. And so he has met all of his most trusted knights on top of Merlin's tower, which has been known by some and will be known by others in the future as the Devil's Tower, and is about to go back into his sarcophagus to sleep for unknown years before he can come back and help the world / America through some other great toil. He has tasked his knights with going forth and upholding the virtues that he has taught them and that they have come to embody, and tells them that there is a great evil coming. There's some great conflict still coming. Those people go on to embody and personify different aspects of Merlin's personality. So you have the druid who would go on and embody and become the folk hero Johnny Appleseed. The druid, the connected to the earth, the connected to nature, the guiding of people according to nature. You have John Henry, the distrust and kind of rebuking of modern thought process, of rational process, of the forsaking of man and man's will and man's power. You have John Bunyan. These people aren't John Bunyan, Johnny Appleseed, and...
You mean
Paul Bunyan.
No, I mean John, Paul's brother.
Yeah.
John's Bunions.
John, the brother of Paul. Yes, I mean Paul Bunyan. I don't know why I said John.
What isn't he the one that wrote Pilgrim's Progress? John Bunyan?
Yeah, you're right. Oh, hey.
Hey, he's probably connected to
John
this bunch
Bunyan,
anyway.
yep.
Of course he is.
Exactly.
You
John
know,
and Paul are... anyways.
In fact, there's been suggestion that John Bunyan was in league with Merlin at one point.
I believe it. You have the people who will become and will personify and will create the legends for Wild Bill Hickok, for any number of other American folk heroes. And they go on. They leave from that place after Merlin is put to bed. They tuck him in after he's put in and sealed into his sarcophagus to sleep for who knows however many hundreds of years before he feels the need, understands, whatever. And this story isn't about them specifically. These people go on and do the thing that was called to them. This story is about the organization, the secret organization that is created by the U.S. government to track, find, research these mysterious things, right? Because Merlin was a part of helping the government, but he wasn't a government agent. So an organization had to be created to kind of not guide him, but surround him and see where he was going and support him in any way they could.
And we
So
now
these
call
are
them
the
the post office workers.
Yeah, that's fine. These these are the people who a lot of the folk hero stories, what these people do are attributed to what a lot of the folk hero stories do, right? Like Calamity Jane, or what was the other one I had? It was a lady who did really well with shooting.
Annie Oakley?
Annie Oakley. Like her, you think that her bullets and her rifle was developed by her alone? No, there was an entire engine of industry that was dedicated to making sure that when she needed to take a shot, it was the absolute most accurate shot. These are the people who the story is about. And one of these people is the Lone Ranger, son of Davy Crockett and Davy Crockett being founding member and sort of leader of this organization for a long time through his work in the government and just his work in the frontier in the world. And then through a trick, a lot of these organizers were moved to a central place, and then they were killed in a church before they could escape, before they could maybe bring out the news of some great terror, before things could resolve. So now you have the Lone Ranger.
Okay, so I have a quick
stories of. We're not quite done with the synopsis, unless you have something to say about.
I just had a thing to say about the Alamo. Perhaps they were in the church because they had found. The Mexicans had found Dracula.
Okay.
And so they were keeping him in the church, right? Because it's the church and it's kind of keeping him suppressed. And they were going to bring him to Merlin, but then they were held out in the church and surrounded, right? And I think towards the end, someone, either they attempted to or they did blow up the powder keg for the thing. And so maybe that was like an attempt to go ahead and try to kill off, I don't know, either Dracula or some kind of nefarious, unholy beast that Santa Anna was going to try and awaken to help him with his conquering.
It could be that. It could be an old god. It could be a lot of things. I think that's a good idea. The fighting style, as Reed said, as referenced by the Dark Tower series, is gunslinging. So this has to do with shoot from the hip accuracy, large calibers, big iron on your hip, the standard Wild Wild West Clint Eastwood quick draw. That whole fighting style is emerging now, right?
Right.
As revolver weapons, as cartridges are coming in, that's the fighting style that we're mostly seeing happening. And then Seth, what was your unique creature from last time?
It was the Big Blue Ox, but not
that's
really
a white
blue,
buffalo.
but it's a white buffalo.
Right, which is a folk creature connected to Paul Bunyan character. So the things that we were tasked with finding out here in this episode is what's leading up, because the Civil War is over. So in our history, the Civil War was over. Great division happened between the North and the South. And the next great conflict was, in fact, World War I, right? With Abraham Lincoln not being assassinated, there are a lot of policies that didn't change. There are a lot of things there's a lot of things that changed that wouldn't have changed originally. And there's a lot of things that didn't change that would have changed. And so America is in an upward trajectory as it sits right now. But the enemies of justice and freedom, of equal rights and equal opportunity, are poised to react. They want to create another conflict. Mm-hmm. That is where they seize power, is in conflict, uncertainty, and fear. They tried in the Civil War and it didn't work. So what are they choosing now? And how is our silver bullet wielding gunslinger going to arrest it, fight it? What is he going to have? How is he going to approach that? What story elements did you guys have for today?
I have sad ending.
I have happy ending.
Great. Oh, perfect.
Which ought to be interesting.
Yes.
That's for random generation of story elements, I guess.
Yep. That's kind of how that works.
Well.
I have unique vehicle, so maybe I better go first.
Okay.
Hi ho, silver, away.
Yeah. My unique vehicle is a hovercraft, right? Not like a futuristic hovercraft where you have the, there's it uses magnets or force, it pushes down. This is a good old-fashioned large balloon bottomed hovercraft. You guys are familiar with those that they use on water? Do you know those?
Oh yeah,
you have the large balloon underneath, and you compress air, and so it floats.
Yeah. And
then you can use a fan to push it. They're used a lot on water because it's a flat space, but you can use them on swampy areas. But really, if you have a robust enough system, like if your balloon that's underneath your hovercraft is robust enough, it can go over anything.
Well, but especially if you think about the prairies, just a sea of grass with slowly undulating, without a lot of if you avoid the vicious rock outcroppings and whatnot, you're probably going to get by.
Yeah, I was thinking that, and then also like a desert,
Yes,
you know,
right.
with where you don't have rocks kind of bigger than your head or so. It would be able to, like, as long as you can maintain the power of keeping it inflated, it would be able to achieve incredible speed across a straight and open space. So I'll say it's a hovercraft, but it's not just a hovercraft. It's created by a genius, right? A genius of the company. And it is a fortified base. It's a resupply zone. It's an everything, right? But it's obscured because of the constant power requirements. It's constantly obscured if it's in the desert. It's obscured in a dust cloud constantly, so as not to be seen, right? It's obscured anywhere else by large clouds. Like, it produces large clouds, because you have to think about it. It's a ship the size of a house, right? The amount of power needed to pressurize a huge balloon to lift it, we're talking major power, right? So it's 50 years ahead of its time when it comes to, like, the company is 50 years ahead of its time when it comes to fuel refinement, when it comes to wiring, when it comes to processing of materials, all these things. They're so far ahead. And then that's one of the ways that they make money, is that they find these geniuses, incorporate them into the company, and then slowly sell the patents out at an even pace. This is one of their management. It's one of their management. One of the ways they manage technology and they manage the progression of America is by hoovering up geniuses that then create these powerful things, and then slowly, as it becomes necessary, selling the patents out, right? So as we sit here in post-Civil War, we're 100 years ahead of their time, right? So we're just starting to use electricity, the bullet refining, the weapon manufacturing is much more advanced. Fuel refining is much more advanced. So they have a super high efficiency engines that are able to basically keep up this. Resupplied by trains, company owned rail cars and stuff. And it's I don't know what it's called. It's called something cool, but it's a legend in and of itself, right? It's a legend in and of itself because it's this weird thing that makes strange noises that you see on the outside, that you can see from, you're sitting at the top of this butte and you're looking down and you can see this dust cloud. And at night, there's like lights coming out of it and stuff. And it's like, what is that? Mostly it hides itself. It has a staff of people, 10 people who live aboard it. And their job is to basically they're the resupply base for agents. They're the, manufacturing hub. And I'd say the company probably has about 6 of them, and they're just positioned around America. As America fills in, there's less and less of them. They're moving west. These things are, because as America fills in, they can't just kind of roll across the Mississippi anymore like they used to be able to in their first stages. They can't do all these things. So that is the unique vehicle. And it's just a support place. So wherever they are, wherever the Lone Ranger is, he has a flare gun, right? That he can fire into the air that goes up, and it's smokeless, and it doesn't make any noise, but it's too high pitched for anyone to hear. And as soon as it gets to the top of its trajectory, it blasts out a single burst of ultraviolet light and then falls back. And these ships, that's one of the things that they're constantly monitoring for, is ultraviolet light, or monitoring for these high pitched signals. And then it'll arrive in a matter of 10 hours typically. So
the bat signal,
basically, except quiet to everyone else. No one else can see it unless all the dogs go crazy for 30 seconds. because there's like a high pitch that no one else can hear noise, and then there's a burst. So that's the vehicle. So at any time, it doesn't move very quickly, but at any time, our lead character can fire this flare and get help within about 10 hours, from wherever he is, really,
Okay. I'd like to just add a couple of historical notes to kind of fill in the story.
Oh, please do.
So after in our timeline, Lincoln was assassinated and Andrew Johnson, the vice president, takes over, and he was kind of a Southern sympathizer. And he kind of, by executive action, signaled kind of a really soft approach to restoring the Union, which pretty much gave as the Southern gentlemen returned home, to kind of reestablish their old lifestyle. The plantations, really, not allowing the ex-slaves to any resources or freedom of movement or anything to start out with. So to feed their families, they would just take on a practically indentured servitude, but by another name. They're working for the boss man, just like and
I think they called it apprenticeship.
Right. And yeah, something like that. But of course the way that worked out is that the more radical wing of the Republicans weren't having any of this. And they were opposing this at all junctures. In fact, to the point of trying to impeach Andrew Johnson, who it failed in the Senate by one vote. And eventually were able to enact harsh measures, which really history repeats itself, but the harsh measures that were placed on Germany after the Versailles Accords at the end of the World War I really forced economic despair and hardship and impossible odds. Yeah. Which many people say held the seeds for World War II. But what happened was the South economically was really crippled for a long time to come, and it didn't do any good. All it did for the former slaves is it just made their situation even worse. And I'm not saying that was like because the high tide lifts all boats, but a low tide, all boats are grounded. And so the former slaves' prospects were crippled by the crushed economy of the post-war South.
Right.
But with one of the things that Lincoln was a genius at is swinging deals. And with him having, John Wilkes Booth's arm, by a night on the scene was able to, grab his arm, and the shot went high into the ceiling and he was captured and whatnot. And Lincoln carried on. And then, of course, oftentimes the effect of something like that is that the nation was outraged and gathered even more strongly behind Lincoln. And he was able to enact a much more, let's welcome home the prodigal brother. And there was a reconstruction with a light to rebuild the South that, called on the ingenuity of the people there, but there were resources available, and they weren't, rather than their economy being crushed, their economy was nurtured. And then, of course, they have in the midst of the in the midst of the Civil War, Lincoln had signed into law the Homestead Act of 1862, and we had a very interesting phenomenon of a flood of ex-slave natives taking advantage of the Homestead Act and heading west and making farms and growing crops and milking cows and raising their families. And instead of instead of North Dakota just being Norwegian and Swedish Lutherans, it was some real rockin' Southern Baptist anyway, it created a very more, shall we say, a more colorful westward expansion and even a more robust westward expansion. But that's what I'm seeing as playing into this. But the Lone Ranger, having faced up to this attempt to crush that league of that had been formed, which was the core. He sought to, rebuild the Texas Rangers. And one of the things that's interesting to me that I love about this kind of a story is the whole concept of the hideout. The Lone Ranger, the legend is that he and Tonto had a secret hideout that included an old silver mine, and he was able to. He had a kit for forging bullets and reloading brass cartridges and the whole silver bullet thing. But one of the things he did is sought out, and trained and nurtured other Texas Rangers. And one of the great hideouts of the Texas Ranger past is the Paladuro Canyon. If you drive from Bismarck, North Dakota, just taking surface roads, not freeways, just driving through North and South Dakota and Nebraska and Kansas and down into the panhandle of Texas, the high plains just get a little bit drier and a little gnarlier, but it's essentially this endless landscape that is very monotonous. And it's, the home of the buffalo and the roving native tribes. And with westward expansion, we know that story. But if you're driving south from Amarillo, Texas, and you're looking at the high plains, all of a sudden you come to like this landscape just drops away, and you have this breathtaking view, and it's the Paladuro Canyon. It's sort of the West Texas answer, kind of the mini Grand Canyon. I mean, it's spectacular. But one of the things about the canyon is that it provides shelter from punishing winds. It provide gathering place for runoff and water, washouts and dried gullies and whatnot. There was a place for growing crops. There was much more water available. There was vegetation. There was grazing. And there was a Texas Ranger named Charles Goodnight who got a partner, and they formed this fabulous ranch. In fact, it's still, I think it was the AJ Ranch. I can't remember exactly, but this partner of Charles Goodnight's family still ranches this in the Paladuro Canyon. I once, back in like maybe the fall of 1978, I me and my friend rented horses and just went on this trail ride down in the Paladuro Canyon. It's really cool. But anyway, it's kind of hidden to view. It's one of those things. It's kind of like people think of this. You go up to where did Wild Bill Hickok get shot? It was in Deadwood, South Dakota. It's a gulch, which is like a narrow canyon kind of formation in the Black Hills of western South Dakota. And you have to really know kind of like the secret entrance to even find it. And like outlaws used to hide out from the law there, and they had gambling establishments. And, apparently Wild Bill Hickok was shot in the back there holding aces and eights. It's called the Dead Man's Hand. And anyway, but the Paladuro Canyon is sort of like that. And it was a kind of a refuge for Goodnight and his band of Texas Rangers. And one of the things that was very high on the list of bringing order to that part of the country, to the vast prairie, is how do you bring your, ranchers were growing cattle. And they formed one of the Rangers, a friend of Charles Goodnight, called Oliver Loving, formed what became the famous Goodnight Loving Trail. I think they started in like 1866, so just after the war, after the Civil War. And it was actually kind of a J-hook. It was a kind of a tricksy maneuver. They would gather cattle from the ranches in West Texas, and then they would literally drive them southwest, which seemed kind of counterintuitive, but they'd get across the Pecos River and then follow the river north up through New Mexico. And the whole idea was to bring vast herds of cattle in and slip them by the Comanche raiders that would always scatter the herds and steal the cattle. And then they would bring them up through, southern Colorado into the railheads, like in western Kansas, to ship the meat west or east. And so this was the legend of the Goodnight, the Goodnight Loving Trail. I mean, it had all the stories of these cowboys and with 6 guns on their hips and, defending the cattle herds from the ravages of predators, but also, roving bands of Comanche. And anyway, it just all kinds of legends grow up around Charles Goodnight and Oliver Loving.
I just had a really good idea.
Yeah.
I love that, Reed. I think that ranch should somehow be incorporated into this story in some way.
Oh, yeah.
But I just had this idea, like a fulcrum on which the whole story is turning around. What's the mission? What are they fighting against? What are they fighting for? You've heard the term, the pen is mightier than the sword.
Yes.
So during the first rumblings of the revolution, right, Merlin worked with Benjamin Franklin to create, because Benjamin Franklin understood the power of words, they worked together to create a pen, right? Paul Revere, who was a silversmith, obviously created the foundation of the work, but it was a pen that when you would wield it, right? And Merlin obviously understood the power of a symbol, because was it not he that helped Arthur wield Excalibur? And this pen, when you would write with it, if you're basically, it would help you write a compelling argument. It would help you sort of translate out your heart onto the paper. This is what Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence with.
Of course he did.
Right? This is the same one, because unfortunately Merlin, while being the son of a fairy, while being Mirrodin, the immortal one, while being all these things, he is still a man.
Yep.
Right? It has another side to it. That if you bathe the pen in the blood of an incredibly convicted person, a person who has a lot of conviction, you could then use it to write whatever you want, and the power of their conviction would help sell, regardless of what that conviction was. This is what John Wilkes Booth did when he killed Lincoln in our history. He killed Lincoln, bathed the pen in his blood, and then escaped. That pen was then moved on to someone else. And then treaties were signed with this pen, and all these things happened with this pen that so disastrously broke apart America. But John Wilkes Booth wasn't able to do that. Instead, that pen, he had the pen, and now the pen is gone. It's moving west. It left the East Coast, and it's moving west. It's been, the company had it for a little bit. Some double agents happened, and it's gone now. But it's resurfaced that that there is a ship waiting on the west coast of America, waiting for this pen. That the forces that will move against, that Merlin warned about, are they want it, because they said that it's if you have enough conviction, it has an incredibly powerful thing. But all you have to do is find someone with great conviction and kill them, and then you have a pen that will last for, who knows what it is, a year, with being able to sort of use that same conviction. And so this is what our hero is trying to stop. This is what he is trying to find, who the connections are. I don't know how much this will work with your guys' happy and sad endings, but I was just thinking of a reason to fight, So it's moving west. It's on a rail right now, but there's some author who has it. There's someone who has it, or it's moving west. And if it leaves, then who knows what will happen? You know, these people don't know about the craziness of World War One. You know, they have no concept of the interlocking multiple, non-aggression / retribution treaties.
Yep.
You know, they don't know about any of these things, but they can only imagine the terror that would happen if this pen were to ever leave. So I would say that's what they think the great fight is. That's what the Lone Ranger and, the other agents of this company believe is the great fight that's coming. What do you guys think about that?
That's kind of cool.
Only kind of cool?
Yeah. Well, okay, it's cool. It's cool. I'll admit it.
I like to kind of think that that the Texas Rangers are the pseudo military arm or the pseudo armed arm of the company. There's clerks everywhere. There's mail carriers everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. The company is in fact the post office. That's whoever suggested that. That's a good idea. Will eventually become the post office. But for now, there's clerks and acolytes everywhere, teaching and keeping their eyes open, running the Pony Express, moving over to run the Telegram network. But the military arm, is the Texas Rangers, based out of this ranch to some degree. Trained there anyways, based out of there. What are your guys' endings so that we can work to it?
So, happy ending. So I guess I'll go with a kind of happy ending, and then Reed can, I don't know, throw in some ideas on why some things might not be so.
Up for you.
You can sadden it up for me. So I'll just throw out kind of an ending here. So, what year was it? Because we brought it up last time. So kind of what I would say in general happens is our folk heroes kind of prep the West after the Civil War. You have plenty of opportunity for people to move to other areas or leave if they didn't like it. So exporting the problem out, right? Because I think that's kind of what happened too, is after that, some of the people that held on to that went down to Brazil, held on to slavery or whatever. So I think maybe you kind of get to the end of the century, right? And you have kind of this leading figure like Teddy Roosevelt, right? Which is almost in and of himself in an encapsulation of kind of your American folk hero, right?
Right.
He becomes president, serves 2 terms, kind of shows the balance of, preserving part of our great, country, our natural resources, but also that kind of bravado. However, I don't know if he was into this or not, but America then becomes maybe a little bit isolationist, right? They have what they need.
Okay.
They end up incorporating through maybe some of this, stuff that happens in between, that Canada and then by proxy Mexico, just in kind of eliminating these foreign forces and influence out of the American continent, are part of the United States now. And part of this too, you mentioned that pin. I don't know how it gets here, but at some point, it is the pin that Teddy Roosevelt writes all his stuff with, right? And then when he was running for his 3rd term, someone shot him during one of his speeches.
Right.
And after that, the pen then is soaked in his blood. And then he starts, writing with it. He ends up winning his 3rd term, and kind of takes over. I don't know if then he has I don't know that, because I think he would have lost, and that's when Wilson would have got in, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So then he's ends up keeping us out of World War I. kind of pinning on America's, like, we have what we need. What do we need? The foreign powers.
Right.
Which could very possibly turn into World War One, basically turning on us, right? That could be the flip side. And then, kind of with that, I don't know, I was tossing around the idea of then with now the more like broad sweeping, I don't know, American empire of the continent, it elects more of a, I don't know if it would be like constitutional monarchy with Teddy Roosevelt
As the head, as the first.
as the head of it. Also, too, with Teddy Roosevelt having kind of been the in this organization, right? So he's kind of one of the what, I don't know if he was a Texas Ranger, but like he would have been like bumping toes in his early years with all these folk heroes doing all this stuff,
Right,
helping
right.
all this, which is then why he's such a kind of American folk hero figure, and then encapsulating all that. And that's kind of, I don't know whether one would think that that's happy or not, but that's what I'm coming up with.
Yeah, but you because of the great success and the whole kind of like worship of the notion of self-reliance and who needs those guys across the ocean anyway, and the it's kind of a happy ending, a really integrated, united Union, North and South,
Yeah.
with much less reason for those who are now in the prosperous South to be bitter about, and the westward expansion that embraces the former slaves. There's 100 years of lynchings that we're probably not going to have. There's all the earmarks of a really happy ending where Teddy Roosevelt, kind of almost a folk hero in reality, embracing all the rough and ready, Rough Rider approach to the glorious West, but willing to continue our prosperity, willing to ship foodstuffs over to those fighting in Europe, but we aren't there to kind of put the final nail in the coffin of the German-Austrian thing after they defeat Russia and the Bolsheviks take over in Russia, and the war drags on, and France is just, after year, just pulverized into nothingness, and the British trying to hold on alone. It creates a whole new power structure with a much weakened but strong central German empire. France greatly diminished, Britain greatly diminished, and of course with Soviet Russia, that's their own nightmare. And the very seeds of the happy ending just spiral into world despair, and it's an empty happy ending and a really sad one.
Right. I kind of imagine it's years later now.
Mm-hmm.
Like the son of the Lone Ranger is 1858 is when Theodore Roosevelt was born.
Yeah.
So the son of the Lone Ranger knows him.
Yeah.
And they're all sitting around kind of talking about old times. Maybe this whole story starts with Theodore Roosevelt getting the Sir, You Really Should Know This download.
Yeah.
Right? In office. The special pen that you've been using for the last 3 years. The one that isn't allowed to leave the Oval Office. The one that like has its own security detail.
Yeah.
They're getting that, right? All through the ages. And at the end, there's this long exposition kind of about what's happening over in Europe, because they have absolutely unfettered access of the upper horizon. They're perfecting long-range radio transmissions now. They're using air balloons.
Yeah.
Because if you think about like a country which was founded by people who weren't content where they wanted personal freedom, and came to a place and had absolutely no holds barring them, like what could they accomplish? So they're kind of getting all these reports in, and then in comes Merlin after these years, right? And the Lone Ranger's son is like recognizes him immediately, and Merlin looks there, and he's bedraggled and ragged, and his beard is long, and he looks a little younger from what the last photo of him said, but he hasn't slept for nearly long enough. Typically he sleeps for like 100 years, 200 years, and it's not been that. And he comes in and he looks at the maps of Europe, and he looks at the reports, and he like takes it in a moment what has happened in this time.
Mm-hmm.
And he just gives them like a scathing, like, did you think that my help was just for your benefit? Did you think that I did this just for you? And I would say that in this story that this the son of the Lone Ranger is giving to Teddy Roosevelt, he's telling him about how it was necessary to use the pen to soften the stories of the folk heroes who did all this,
Mm-hmm.
to obfuscate what they actually stood for. It was necessary to do that. Like justifying, obfuscating the truth. And Theodore Roosevelt, of course, was at first very against it, but he was slowly convinced. And then Merlin comes in and wakes him up to this reality, and then wakes him up as Merlin does, just comes in and in a moment reads the room, sees all the maps, understands what they have done with this gift, and then basically lays out everything you said. So then at one time, while it felt like this kind of great victory, this like
Mm-hmm.
opportunity, while a lot of people did in fact receive opportunity, it was abused at the end.
Yep.
It was twisted at the end.
Yes.
I don't know how it would end like that. If Teddy Roosevelt would say, get those boys on the guns, we're going to war. But like, even at that, like just deciding to go to war just because you found out you should have gone to war isn't a good reason to go to war.
Yep.
Wow. What a happy and sad ending. Anything else you want to add to that, Seth?
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to our telling of the actual truth of what happened after the Civil War. We're living in an alternate dimension. The real... No, I just keep thinking of the Man in the High Castle. Thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you for listening to this story. If you have any questions about it, any concerns about it, let us know. Send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com, or message us on Twitter at @getsbettercast. We would love to hear about your critiques of human history and human kind. We'll be talking about that next week. I think it'll be a really interesting one. We'll have a lot of interesting thoughts to talk about next week when we kind of get into our motivations, our inspirations, our own political beliefs about what the right thing to do would be if we had a pen that could convince people to follow what we said. Until next week, don't forget to wait, because it gets better. Bye.